Hi, gang. Mrs. Sandrock helped me with the pronunciation of this to make sure I'm saying it correctly. This is an excerpt from La Relacion. How was that? So, Cabeza de Vaca, our Spanish explorer. This is the second of 3 texts by explorers on which you will be quizzed probably within the next week or so. So it says in the background, and I'll highlight the important things I think, the main ideas I pinpoint as I go. It says in 1536, Spanish slave hunters raiding in northern Mexico were startled by a strange sight. A Spaniard, strangely dressed and in company with Indians. Long given up for dead, Cabeza de Vaca had survived one of the most disastrous expeditions in the history of the Spanish conquest to become the first European to cross North America. Cabeza de Vaca came from a family of Spanish conquistadors or conquerors. He had been a soldier for nearly 20 years when in 1527 he joined an expedition to Spanish North America. Appointed by the King of Spain, he became treasurer and second in command, assigned the task of colonizing the territory north and east of the Gulf of Mexico. Now, I suppose I should probably mark that he was the first European to cross North America. Although that's not something that's going to give us insight really into what he's written, still an important detail. Now we're on the section Disaster Strikes, and I am not going to try the pronunciation of that name, but the expedition sailed with 5 ships and 600 men. 2 ships were lost. 2 ships were lost in a hurricane. 200 men drowned or deserted. After landing in Tampa Bay, the leader sent his ships north and ordered 300 men to march to New Spain, which is present-day Mexico, which he guessed to be a few weeks away. Months later, the ships were gone, and the desperate landing party was eating its horses to survive. Using horsehide and nails made from melted armor, they built 5 barges and sailed along the Gulf Coast from Florida to Texas, hoping to reach Spanish settlements in northern Mexico. 2 barges and 80 men washed up on or near Galveston Island. Ultimately, only de Vaca and 3 other men survived. De Vaca survived by adapting to his new surroundings. For 6 years, he lived with dozens of Native Americans, dozens of Native American groups, and various roles he served. He was a captive, he traded, and they also thought him to be a well-known healer. In 1534, he and the 3 other men, the 4 survivors, escaped, and they set out across the desert in search of New Spain. In 1536, they finally reached their goal. A year later, Cabeza de Vaca returned to Spain, where he wrote his account of the expedition, La Relacion. And it was a report to the king. So again, this is not a fun story. The main purpose is not to entertain, it is to report. And you have to keep that in mind when you're reading. The king rewarded de Vaca by appointing him governor of a South American colony, where his humane treatment of Native Americans may have cost him his job. By 1545, he had been ousted from his position and convicted on a corruption charge in Spain. He was exiled to Africa and eventually pardoned. In 1552, he returned to Spain, and he did end his days as a judge. All right? So I should have highlighted up above that this is an account. I talked about it, but I should have switched. It's hard to read and find all the buttons I need to switch around. Okay? So let's go ahead and start, and I'll pause at each of the marginal questions And keep in mind, in between each page, there is a blank on which you vocab for me there. You can take notes. Someone defined on my file. That's okay. Okay, always start with this background. In the 1500s, Spanish conquistadors took to the seas to claim new land for Spain. Seeking gold and silver, they explored unfamiliar territory and encountered Native American cultures they did not understand. By the time Cabeza de Vaca sailed, Spaniards had conquered the Aztecs of Mexico, the Inca of Peru, two of the most advanced civilizations in the Americas. Millions of Native Americans would die in this often brutal cultural encounter. In La Relacion, Cabeza de Vaca finds himself unexpectedly at the mercy of the people he came to conquer, the Native Americans. Okay? And then it says at this point in the account, because we only have an excerpt, so they give us these italicized portions to help us understand the excerpts. So at this point, the barge has abandoned the rest, and de Vaca's barge has joined one commanded by two other officers. The next 3 chapters describe the shipwreck of Cabeza de Vaca's barge on Galveston Island and the crew's encounter with the Caracaca. Oh, I did not do that well. Here, let me grab the dictionary. Oh. iPad's not turning on. Okay, we'll come back to that in class. The Karankawa Indians who lived there. That's my stab at it. I'm sure it's wrong. Okay, if I can get dictionary.com here, not happening. Might be time for a new iPad. Our 2 barges continued in company for 4 days, each man eating a ration of half a handful of raw corn a day. Then the other barge was lost in a storm, but nothing but God's great mercy kept us from going down too. It was winter and bitterly cold, and we had suffered hunger and the heavy beating of the waves for many days. Next day, the men began to collapse. By sunset, all in my barge had fallen over on one another, close to death. Few were any longer conscious. Not 5 could stand. When night fell, only the navigator and I remained able to tend the barge. 2 hours after dark, he told me I must take over. He believed he was going to die that night. So at this point, I'll pause. You can pause the video and answer A, and then I'll pick back up. Soon I took the tiller. After midnight, I moved over to see if he were dead. He said no, in fact, was better, and would steer till daylight. In that hour, I would have welcomed death, rather than to see so many around me in such a condition. When I had returned the helm to the navigator, I lay down to rest, but without much rest, for nothing was farther from my mind than sleep. Near dawn, I seemed to hear breakers resounding. The coast lying low, they roared louder. Surprised at this, I called to the navigator, who said he thought, there's a picture for you. He thought we were coming close to land. We sounded and found ourselves in 7 fathoms. The navigator felt we should stay clear of the shore till daylight, so I took an oar and pulled it on the shore side, wheeling the stern to seaward about a league out. As we drifted into shore, a wave caught us and heaved the barge a horseshoe throw, about 42 feet, out of the water. The jolt, when it hit, brought the dead-looking men to. Seeing land at hand, they crawled through the surf to some rocks. Here we made a fire and parched some of our corn. We also found rainwater. The men began to regain their senses, their locomotion, and their hope. This was the day of our landing, November 6th. Next section is about what befell Oviedo with the Indians. After we ate, I ordered Lope de Oviedo, our strongest man, to climb one of the trees not far off and ascertain the lay of the land. He complied and found out from the treetop that we were on an island. This was Galveston Island. He also said that the ground looked as if cattle had trampled it, and therefore that this must be a country of Christians. And I'll pause. Answer B. I sent him back for a closer look to see if he could find any worn trails, but warned him not to risk going too far. He went and came upon a path which he followed for half a league to some empty huts. The Indians were gone to shoal flats to dig roots. He took an earthen pot, a little dog, and a few mullets. Now read your note, those are not haircuts, and started back. We had begun to worry what might have happened to him, so I detailed another 2 men to check. They met him shortly and saw 3 Indians with bows and arrows following him. The Indians were calling to him, and he was gesturing them to keep coming. When he reached us, the Indians held back and sat down on the shore. Half an hour later, 100 bowmen reinforced the first 3 individuals. Whatever their stature, they looked like giants to us in our fright. We could not hope to defend ourselves. Not half a dozen of us could even stand up. The inspector, Solis, and I walked out and greeted them. They advanced, and we did our best to placate and ingratiate. We gave them beads and bells, and each one of them gave us an arrow in pledge of friendship. They told us by signs that they would return at sunrise and bring food, having none then. The Indians' hospitality before and after a new calamity or trouble. As the sun rose next morning, the Indians appeared as they promised, bringing an abundance of fish and of certain roots which tasted like nuts, some bigger than walnuts, some smaller, mostly grubbed from the water with great labor. That evening they came again with more fish and roots and brought their women and children to look at us. They thought themselves rich with the little bells and beads we gave them, and they repeated their visits on other days. Being provided with what we needed, we thought to embark again. It was a struggle to dig our barge out of the sand it had sunk in, and another struggle to launch her. For the work in the water while launching, we stripped and stowed our clothes in the craft. Quickly clambering in and grabbing our oars, we had rowed 2 crossbow shots from shore when a wave inundated us. Being naked and the cold intense, we let our oars go. The next big wave capsized the barge. The inspector and 2 others held fast, but that only carried them more certainly underneath, where they drowned. A single roll of the sea tossed the rest of the men into the rushing surf and back onto shore half drowned. We lost only those the barge took down, but the survivors escaped as naked as they were born, with the loss of everything we had. That was not much, but valuable to us in bitter November cold. Our bodies so emaciated, we could easily count every bone and look the very picture of death. I can say for myself that from the month of May, I had eaten nothing but corn, and that sometimes raw. I could never bring myself to eat any of the horse meat at the time our beasts were slaughtered. And fish I did not taste 10 times. On top of everything else, a cruel north wind commenced to complete our killing. Pause, answer C, and then come back to the video. The Lord willed that we should find embers while searching the remnants of our former fire. We found more wood and soon had big fires raging. Before them with flowing tears, we prayed for mercy and pardon, each filled with pity not only for himself, but also for all his wretched fellows. At sunset, the Indians, not knowing we had gone, came again with food. When they saw us looking so strangely different, they turned back in alarm. I went after them, calling, and they returned, though frightened. I explained to them by signs that our barge had sunk and 3 of our number drowned. They could see at their feet 2 of the dead men who had washed ashore. They could also see that the rest of us were not far from joining these 2. The Indians, understanding our full plight, sat down and lamented for half an hour so loudly they could have been heard a long way off. It was amazing to see these wild, untaught savages howling like brutes in compassion for us. It intensified my own grief at our calamity and had the same effect on the other victims. When the cries died down, I conferred with the Christians about asking the Indians to take us to their homes. Some of our number who had been to New Spain, warned that the Indians would sacrifice us to their idols. But death, being surer and nearer if we stayed where we were, I went ahead and beseeched the Indians. They were delighted. They told us to tarry a little while, then they would do as we wished. Presently, 30 of them gathered loads of wood and disappeared to their huts, which were a long walk away, while we waited with the remainder until near nightfall. Then, supporting us under our arms, they hurried us from one to another of the 4 big fires they had built along the path. At each fire, when we regained a little warmth and strength, they took us on so swiftly our feet hardly touched the ground. Thus we made their village, where we saw they had erected a hut for us with many fires inside. An hour later, they began a dance of celebration that lasted all night. For us, there was no joy, feasting, or sleep, as we waited the hour they should make us victims. Now notice up above, I skipped marginal question D. You do not have to do that one. In the morning, when they brought us fish and roots and acted in every way hospitably, we felt reassured, and somewhat lost our anxiety of the sacrificial knife. All right, now there's going to be, they cut a section, gave us a summary. Always read these italicized portions. Cabeza de Vaca learned that men from one of the other barges had also landed on the island, bringing the number of Europeans there to about 90. In a matter of weeks, all but 16 of them died of disease, which spread to the Indians and killed half of them as well. Some of the Indians wanted to put the remaining Europeans to death, but were dissuaded by Cabeza de Vaca's host. Cabeza de Vaca and his men were later forced to act as healers. So he's going to tell us now how they became medicine men. The islanders wanted to make physicians of us without examination or a review of diplomas. Their method of cure is to blow on the sick. The breath and the laying on of hands, supposedly casting out the infirmity. They insisted we should do this too and be of some use to them. We scoffed at their cures and at the idea we knew how to heal, but they withheld food from us until we complied. An Indian told me I knew not whereof I spoke, and the saying their methods had no effect. Stones and other things growling about in the fields, he said, had a virtue whereby passing a pebble along the stomach could take away pain and heal. Surely extraordinary men like us embodied such powers over nature. Hunger forced us to obey, but disclaiming any responsibility for our failure or success. An Indian falling sick would send for a medicine man who would apply his cure. The patient would then give the medicine man all he had and seek more from his relatives to give. The medicine man makes incisions over the point of the pain, sucks the wound, and cauterizes it. This remedy enjoys high repute among the Indians. I have, as a matter of fact, tried it on myself with good results. The medicine men blow on the spot they have treated as a finishing touch, and their patient regards himself relieved. Our method, however, was to bless the sick, breathe upon them, and recite a prayer, perhaps an Ave Maria, and pray earnestly to God our Lord for their recovery. When we concluded with the sign of the cross, he willed that our patient should directly spread the news that they had been restored to health. In consequence, the Indians treated us kindly. They deprived themselves of food to give us and presented us skins and other tokens of gratitude. And you can go ahead and answer E. And we've reached the end, so till next time, take care.